Good evening, I'm Alan Jackson, and welcome to Nashville. There's a lot of emotion around climate science. I'm an advocate for science. I think you'd have to be a bit off balance to purposefully want to see the destruction of the habitat in which we live. But climate science is not as simple as it's presented. And sometimes it's even just downright misleading. One example is renewable energy. It's a wonderful concept, but it's a little bit like clicking your heels together and you can go home. And while I'm an advocate for renewable energy, the concept in that discussion, protected by the word science, well, it's become something held in greater reverence than most people's religious faith. Our children are indoctrinated with it far more carefully, far more persistently, and candidly far more routinely than they are ever taught a biblical worldview. Now that's a problem. And if you're not awake to it yet, please wake up. The truth is that God made the earth and everything in it. And when it comes to how we treat the world He created, we may have taken many steps forward over the last 50 years. They need to be celebrated just a bit. Our air is much cleaner. Our water is as well. You can swim past the Statue of Liberty. You can even fish in Ohio's Cuyahoga River. That's the one that actually caught fire from the pollution that was in the water. Harmful lead, it's no longer in gasoline. CFCs have been phased out, and the ozone hole over Antarctica, it's healing apparently. Bald eagles are even making a comeback. You can see the baby eagles on live webcams now. Renewable energy, it's become a household word. And the miles per gallon for cars and trucks has increased substantially. They still go just as fast. We have an expert to help us unpack some of this. Joining us tonight, the publisher of Climate Depot, Marc Morano. Welcome back, Marc.
Thank you, Alan. Happy to be here.
You know, when I look back at the improvements we've made, I'm optimistic about what's next. But it's hard to find the truth when so much of the discussion is based on threats. Listen to these comments.
And the only existential threat humanity faces, even more frightening than a nuclear war, is global warming.
I've heard young leaders talk with me about a term they've coined called climate anxiety. Right? Which is fear of the future and the unknown, of whether it makes sense for you to even think about having children.
That's what's boiling the oceans, creating these atmospheric rivers and the rain bombs and sucking the moisture out of the land and creating the droughts and melting the ice.
Marc, if we didn't have experts like you to turn to, I'd want to bury my head in the sand and just give up. Haven't we done a lot already, and aren't most of us ready to do even more?
Yes. Okay. Well, first I'll address the video you just played there, Alan. There is a thing called climate anxiety, and it kind of looks like an electoral map. It's the blue areas on the map, the San Francisco, the Los Angeles, and the Boston and Chicago. It's liberals who have been literally scared to death since childhood about climate change. They suffer anxiety, and it disproportionately does affect children. But it's based on scare tactics. It's based on extreme climate model scenarios, in many cases by previously US-funded government studies, promoting the most far-fetched scenarios that we're all gonna die. And of course, I love Al Gore talking about rain bombs of all things. You know, I better look around, make sure no bombs are dropping on my head right now. It's a nice sunny day, so I think I'm safe from the rain bombs. But you brought up a very good point. You mentioned the Cuyahoga River and how filthy it was. The first Earth Day, which, by the way, we're coming up now. This is the 55th Earth Day coming up on April 22nd. And this, here on April 22nd. And this day was originally started by a lot of people concerned, as you mentioned, about rivers, about particularly city air qualities, about all the pollution, about the countryside being littered. And this is the greatest environmental success story that since 1970, the United States has radically improved our air quality, our water quality, all at the same time increasing population and radical increases in economic growth. We've done it through technological innovation and by focusing and by raising awareness of these problems. The industry is became aware after the first Earth Day. So I don't want to knock all Earth Days. I mean, the original impetus, there was a lot of nuts involved in Earth Day as well. By the way, they were worried about man-made global cooling at the time in 1970, and not global warming. They were warning of a coming ice age. But there were many, particularly Americans, who were just concerned about the state of rivers and air. And now, in 2025, World Health Organization even admits that the United States has among the cleanest air in the world. We are the environmental success story of the world, We need to reduce this climate anxiety, the environmental anxiety, and you can only do that with facts.
Well, one of the most talked about so-called solutions as we go forward is wind energy. It sounds
Yes.
good, but I still have no idea how many windmills it would take to create even 5% of the power we need. Are they worth building on land, sea, or even at all?
Okay, currently they're more of a boutique project, or maybe a small regional project in certain areas, or maybe a small nation that has a lot of wind and space available that want to do it. But here's what you need to know about wind. In the United States, and we have spent untold hundreds of, first of all, we spent trillions on the whole Inflation Reduction Act. We spent almost $100 billion on Obama's green stimulus funding, wind and solar, all these renewable energy projects as we banned their competition. Now think of Muhammad Ali. They're doing this all the time, a boxer, right? Imagine if he was going to fight George Foreman and they said, oh, you're not going to let Foreman in the ring, but we're going to declare you the heavyweight champion of the world. It doesn't work that way. And so the media and what climate activists and academia have done is said, solar and wind are the best and they're cheaper than fossil fuels. Oh, but we need to ban fossil fuels and we need to mandate and subsidize solar and wind so that they can be competitive. It doesn't sound like they're that good in the first place. Less than 14% of U.S. electricity, this is one stat, comes from solar and wind despite all the massive subsidies. And total energy production, remember, solar and wind can't make anything. But their total energy production in the United States is less than 5% combined. There's no there. 100 years ago, 80% of our energy came from fossil fuels. Today, 80% of our energy comes from fossil fuels. No matter how many mandates, no matter how many subsidies, no matter how many green stimuluses or the government tries to throw at it. And they're not more earth friendly. EVs takes 500,000 pounds of materials to build, dug up from the earth to build one Tesla-style electric car battery. And you mentioned wind. To make one wind turbine, you have to extract 900 tons of steel, 2,500 tons of concrete, and 45 tons of non-renewable plastic. Renewable energy really does dig the earth. Out of the Brady Bunch 1970s way, in a little deep earth way, guess who owns pretty much a monopoly on all that? China, which is where we have to rely on for our EV and solar and wind. It's not a good policy for the United States, and luckily we're literally reversing everything that I'm talking about now with this whole previous policy.
Well, Marc, please stay with us for another segment. There is more to discuss as we welcome another spring. And if you want to jump in with your thoughts on the environmental debate, you can go to our new website at ajnow.com. Later in the show, we'll talk about building a healthier world spiritually for today and the generations to come. I'll be right back. We're back now with the head of the Climate Depot, Marc Morano. He was also part of the senior staff of the Senate Environment and Public Works Committee. He's the author of several good books, including the one called Green Fraud: Why the Green New Deal is Even Worse Than You Think. Marc, I spend a lot of time in Israel, and I have personally seen how they're leading the conversation in many ways on sustainable farming. You know, water has always been a scarce resource there,
Yes.
but their desalination plants have turned a desert into an agricultural haven. You'll find some of the best fruits and vegetables there today. And that's all because they pioneered the way on new technology. What do you think about these kinds of changes?
That's literally the driving force for why Earth is happy on this Earth Day 2025. What Israel's done with the desalination plants, California could learn a lot. If you remember, the hydrants were empty, and the reason was, well, all we could do is get water from the ocean, and it was salt water, and it was too corrosive. Well, if they had invested in infrastructure like the desalination plants like Israel, you could have had actual water in California to put out those fires. You have places that have come up with massive dike systems in the Netherlands, which is underwater, essentially a lot of their cities, and they've come up with great pump and design systems where they can literally survive at below sea level. And then you have areas like sustainable forestry, where 50 years ago, you could cut forests and you'd have clear cut and devastation. It would take decades to recover. Now they have so-called sustainable forestry, where they come in with lagging and do certain swaths of land, scientifically calculated, and within 7 years, you can't distinguish a logged forest versus unlogged forests in terms of plant and animal species. So the news has been so good. And one last point on this is that Donald Trump is making the Earth smile on this Earth Day 2025 because he is leading the way for Western nations. In Europe, in many cases, the elections in Germany and other places are forcing Europeans to go back to domestic energy production, which is and same with the US and Canada eventually, which is what we need, because when you produce energy with the highest environmental standards in Western nations, and you have the highest technological and human rights standards, the Earth benefits. When you stop relying on energy from the Middle East, China, Russia, Venezuela, that is the dirtiest and most invasive forms of energy to get. And it pains the Earth, to use a stupid phrase that the left likes to. And I say, if they can speak for the Earth, the climate activists and the environmental left, I say I can speak for the Earth too. The Earth is very happy with the orange one and president right now. And more CO2, by the way, equals more fertilization of our atmosphere. Even NASA has admitted that. We have the greening of planet Earth as CO2 levels go up. There is no climate crisis. More and more scientists speaking out. And most recently, the 2022 Nobel Prize winner in physics, Dr. John Clauser. So it's been an amazing time. It's really, truly a time for us to celebrate our accomplishments at Earth Day 2025.
Well, you have very aptly pointed out that there's good reason for hope. But I'd like to ask you about the business of green. Companies, especially some in China, that are only concerned about selling products that are supposed to help. But are they really only out to make the green dollar bills? How can we distinguish between the good and the bad?
Great question. Okay, there's actually two simple ways. Look at their actions and look at their circumstances. So in the case of China, yeah, they are the leader in solar and wind, and they're providing all of this for the rest of the world. People are going at people, oh, China is building 1 or 2 coal plants per week. They have most of the world's coal production as a monopoly at the moment. And they have no interest in the green agenda other than how it can benefit themselves. And they're digging up the earth with the lowest standards. They're buying up, essentially going in places like the Congo with Chinese-owned firms with child labor. I mean, it's a horrendous situation. And the other way you can tell with people in green energy is they're out for the buck. And if you look at the Inflation Reduction Act and how many recipients has gotten that money, now approaching $2 trillion in funding, the money is going out so much. Any talk of cutting it and people start screaming bloody murder, oh my, we can't. That's when you know something's up, is when people's entire business model depends on sucking off the U.S. taxpayer resources. And that's when you know they're not really serious about saving the earth, but about making money. And that's what we're seeing in the green energy world. Seen it since Solandra, when Obama's green energy stimulus. We're seeing it now. In many cases, these companies form, they take, we're seeing it with Stacey Abrams, we saw it with John Podesta. We're talking tens of millions plus dollars. They form a group, the group goes bankrupt, they form another group, the same board of directors. They can just keep doing it because the taxpayer money is endless for these subsidies. We're the counties in California don't have enough bureaucrats to spend the money that the Inflation Reduction Act from Biden for green energy is spending. The money is sitting unspent because there's not enough bureaucrats to spend it. It's like a green tax windfall that does nothing for the climate, but enriches a lot of people, particularly Democratic donors in this case.
Well, finally, prior to seeing you today, you shared an environmental story that says pretty much all you need to know about how the green advocates continue to stir the pot. The headline said, "Bad news for man's best friend. Dogs are environmental villains." Please tell me that it was an April 1st prank.
This is not an April 1st prank. This was in the UK Guardian, Mother Jones magazine. They're going after dogs and pet ownership, cats as well, telling us that essentially their carbon footprint is huge, that they're destructive to the environment, and they're hinting that we need limits and come out of restrictions on this. Now, this is on the heels of previous studies. This is fascinating because they've said that dogs, according to studies, will be the first victims of climate change. So dogs are causing climate change, but they're also a victim of climate change. And then another study, and I'm not making this up, this was in the UK Independent a couple years ago, global warming causing dogs to become depressed, say pet behavioralists. So dogs are causing global warming. Dogs are being affected by it the most, and they're getting depressed over their impact. So we have here, according to the experts, Alan, self-loathing canines. I don't think I've ever seen that in my life, but apparently these dogs are going around with the weight of the world because they're causing global warming. This is the wackiness that passes for climate science today.
Well, Marc Morano, thank you for coming back to the show. I'm sure we'll get a lot of emails about your visit.
Thank you very much, Alan. Appreciate it.
If you want to send us a question, you can use our easy new path by going to ajnow.com. You'll see a button in the top right that'll take you to a simple way to send it to us. You can also find previous shows and a lot more. We always enjoy hearing from you. Coming up next, hope, truth, salt, and light. It's all there if you know where to look. Stay right where you are. You know, honestly, I like to be outdoors. Just about any activity outdoors is refreshing and renewing to me. I'm an advocate. In fact, we've been given a stewardship assignment over this planet, but we're told not to worship it. You know, the fancy word these days is climate science. When they really want to get our attention, they call something science. Well, in 2018, climate activist Greta Thunberg fired off an urgent tweet. This is real. The tweet said, quote, "A top climate scientist is warning that climate change will wipe out all of humanity unless we stop using fossil fuels over the next 5 years." Well, here we are 7 years later, and people still on the planet, still with us. What has not vanished is humanity and the earth, but rather just that tweet. It's gone. While the world is plunging towards destruction and human character is deteriorating and violence is exploding, while millions of children are being terminated in the womb and all sorts of atrocities, horrors, and genocides are being perpetrated, they want us to change our light bulbs or to stop using a gas stove. They tell us that fossil fuels are the greatest expression of evil amongst us. And again, I'm an advocate for taking care of the world in which we live, but I urge you that first we have to take care of the relationship we have with the living God. Every generation has to give attention to our hearts, or the environment won't be an issue. We'll destroy the world and all of us that are in it. Now that's the truth. If we'll choose God, there are reasons for hope. When I return, I'm going to read and respond to some of your emails. And now we're going to read some of your emails. It's one of my favorite parts of the program. Nancy commented on the episode with Coach Joe Kennedy. Our government took God out of our schools, and now we can see how messed up the schools and children have become. I hope we have all reached a point that we can see how important it is for us, our children, our schools, and our nation. Now we should keep prayer because we need God more today than ever. Amen, Nancy. I think your diagnosis and your solution are accurate. Mark in California noted, we're on a fixed income and our children are still in the home. They have developmental challenges. We are ready for the hardships of change. Hopefully the country will benefit from the new administration. America is not a democracy, we're a republic, much better than anything else in the world's sphere. Praying is good. Actions put feet on your prayers. We need to get back to the founding principles of our government. God is the foundation of our government and our nation. Mark, you are telling a lot of truth, and I thank you for the reminder that the change begins at our kitchen table, and then it expands into our families, our holiday tables, and ultimately into our friends group. We are the change agents, far more than the politicians that sit in their ivory towers in distant places. And finally, Dennis J. from Maine said, I really appreciate all you're doing with Alan Jackson Now, Culture and Christianity, and World Outreach Church. It's refreshing to hear the truth told, and I admire you using your voice. If more people would, what a difference we could make. Keep going. It's an encouragement to all. And this comes from a guy who lives in Maine with, let's say, not a good governor. We are praying for a change. It will take a change in the hearts of God's people here first. Amen, Dennis. We will join you in those prayers. And just a reminder, we are in the process of building a community of trust, and we would love to have as many people as possible involved. There's something you can do. Tell a friend to watch the show. It's live at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, 6 p.m. Central, or anytime on YouTube. In fact, you can go to ajnow.com for the latest episode. You can send a comment or even purchase my new book, Angels, Demons, and You. Thanks for helping to share the word with others. Truth matters, and the hope it will spread. I'm Alan Jackson. You have a nice evening.